Hello, welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to talk about ribbing. Ribbing is the process of knitting a pattern that repeats. We're going to start out with a single rib, which is also known as a 1x1 rib. When that's written out, you'll see 1x1. 1x1 rib and single rib are the same thing. And what that means is that you're knitting a stitch, purling a stitch, knitting a stitch, purling a stitch, all the way across the row. Okay? And what we will then progress to is a double rib or a 2x2 rib. Knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. But then there are lots of variations that you can also do. You can do a knit 3, purl 1 rib. Knit 3, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1, knit 3, purl 1. You can do all sorts of different ribs. You can start out in a single rib. You can put a little bit of a cable design, then do more single rib, another little cable design. Sky's the limit with ribbing. But basically what you're doing is you're repeating a stitch pattern that has a lot of stretch to it. And historically, sweaters were knit to fit the body or be loose. And then the ribbing would sort of cinch the sweater in to keep the heat in. Now we like to sort of block our ribbings out a little bit. Some people like the sweater just to hang. They don't like that cinch. But basically that's what ribbing is. And it doesn't have to be done just at the edge of a sweater. You can do a whole scarf out of a ribbing. Wouldn't this look nice as a scarf? For us, we're making a block for our blanket. You can have an entire sweater knit with ribbing. So ribbing, it's essential or necessary to most sweaters. Not all. You don't have to have a ribbing if the pattern is such very heavy cable, for instance, that can kind of hold its own. But let's learn this ribbing. Let me show you. Okay, so to do this ribbing, and I apologize, it's a very dark and dreary day today. Basically, we just purl our stitch, bring the yarn to the back, and knit a stitch. Bring the yarn to the front again and purl a stitch. It's as simple as that. It's just doing each stitch, but remember, knit stitches, the yarn is in the back, purl stitches, the yarn is in the front. So that's what you need to remember. And some people don't like to knit ribs because of all that back and forth motion, but I don't mind doing them. Now let me jump ahead a little bit. We haven't quite finished our row. But if I were to bind off my stitches, here's what I would do. Remember the bind off, I said you had to have at least the 2 stitches on the end, and then you start passing them over. It's the same with ribbing. You're passing one stitch over the next, and you just keep the pattern up as it's established. So I bring this stitch over. The next stitch is a knit. See these knit V's? So ribbing, what we do is we knit the knits and purl the purls as they face us. Here's a purl bump. You can see that purl. So we need to do another purl. Okay? And then pass this stitch over. So it's as easy as that. That's all there is to it. Here is the rib that I've knit. Here is the rib that I've bound off. So that is the single rib, knitting it and binding it off. Single rib is not my favorite of all the ribs, but it can be fun. This is a single rib that I just showed you in one color. But look, you can do them in 2 colors too. Here, I have the knit done in the blue, the purl done in the tan. So instead of switching knits and purls, you're also switching the yarns. And this mitten that I made a long time ago is kind of fun, and that ribbing doesn't have to be your only edge. Here, I started out with stockinette stitch. And remember I told you stockinette has the propensity to roll? I'm allowing it to roll. I want it to roll. Then I've done a garter ridge. Then I've done the single rib. And then I got into my pattern. I like this mitten. It's a fun mitten. I don't think I ever wrote up the pattern because I couldn't decide about the thumb. I gave it a tan thumb. But another one that I made, I used the rib on the thumb. And I think I prefer this one. So if anybody wants me to create a pattern for this right away, just let me know and I'll get to it. Otherwise, this will probably go in the drawer again and wait its turn. So that's a plain single rib and a single rib with a little bit of character to it. Here's our double rib. And look at how much stretch that gives. So this single rib, I forgot to mention, the single rib has 35 stitches on the needle. And I will put, I think I forgot to mention this, I will put all of the instructions for the blocks in the description box. This one has 35 stitches. And one reason for that, the rib, the knit one, purl one rib is in obviously a multiple of 2. But we want to end the block the way we started. So we add a stitch. So we're doing knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, and at the very end we want to knit. So sometimes in patterns you will see multiple of 2 stitches plus 1. That plus 1 is how many extra stitches at the end do you need to even it out. Sometimes if you're doing a single rib, you have an even number of stitches in a pattern. And it'll be the knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. You'll end on the purl. When you flip it over, you start again, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. So sometimes having an even number of stitches is helpful because both rows are the same. You're just going to have one row, repeat that row. If you do it like this and you have knits on each end, row 1 is going to be knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 across the row until you get to the last stitch and then knit 1. But when you turn it over, then you'll have to start with purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, repeat across the row to the ending stitch, which you then purl. So when you're knitting a pattern, you have to watch out for things. If you've got an even number of stitches and the pattern gives that plus 1, tells you to do an extra stitch at the end, something's wrong. So you have to think to yourself, you know, am I working on an odd number of stitches, an even number of stitches? That's one of those things that makes knitting kind of fun. You know, you can follow instructions just as they are written, or you can kind of think, is that how I really want mine to look? Do I want to have the purl at the end, or do I want another knit at the end? Do I want to maybe add a stitch? You know, it's fun. Another thing that's fun, this swatch is not 7 inches across. 7 inches across is about here, which is where I want this to be placed in my blanket. I want it to look like this. I don't want it to look like this. So for this, I'm purposely making a number of stitches which, when it's laid flat and measured, is not going to get my desired measurement. I have built in this stretch. If this were on its own, it wouldn't work. But because it's being secured in our blanket from blocks on all 4 sides, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So this one, and again, I'll put this down below. This is our double rib. And I believe this has 34 stitches on it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34 stitches. And this is lovely. Another swatch block that I showed once before. We're ready for this now. This is our interrupted rib or double rib with garter. And again, we've got our knit rib, but then instead of having the purl stitches in here, we've got garter. When we flip it over, do you see how it's reversible? It's perfectly fine. This is lovely, but it's not a duplicate of this. Whereas these other swatches, it is. This one, if you turn it over, it's the same, reversible. This is reversible in that both sides are pretty, but this does not reverse to this, which is fine. It doesn't matter for our purposes. So I'll put the pattern for this down below too. And basically, if you remember, it is knit across the right side row, and then on the wrong side row, you work a purl 2, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2. We're ready. So in this one video, you've got three blocks that you can complete. Isn't that great? Now I want you to see some real life ribs on sweaters. This is one of my favorite sweaters. It's got this nice pattern down below and it's got stripes. It's really not too difficult. It's one of my favorites. This rib is a double rib. And basically, I'm trying not to say basically as often. I'm finding these videos are very helpful in seeing how you present yourself. So I'm learning a lot from these videos. I hope you guys are too. We're each learning different things. But this is knit in the gray. And that's because this sweater has quite a bit going on. So our rib is sort of calming the sweater down. It's got a nice whitish rib down here on the sleeves. I didn't want as much on the neckline. If this were a pullover, you could maybe knit the rib all the way up and give it a turtleneck. So again, when you're knitting sweaters, you can always change your mind. If you don't want a scant rib, just keep going. If you've got enough yarn, why not? Now here's another rib. It's a double rib. It's a double rib, and this works, as I said, it works a double rib with a bit of a cable in it. So the cable is continuing our pattern from the rib up on this initial one. This one it doesn't. Another fun thing about this rib is we've done this rib in green. We've done the main body of the sweater in this gray. Let's separate it with just a little bit of blue. It just gives a little bit of oomph. And the other thing about this rib, say you're knitting the rib. This is as far as you've gotten. You're just doing an ordinary rib. Well, why not keep the rib going and eventually end up with a sweater where the rib is taken all the way out. The rib becomes a decorative feature. It's nice, isn't it? This is another one of my favorite sweaters. And again, you can knit this rib as wide as you would like. You can knit the rib so wide that it loops over. Remember, ribs are reversible. So whatever is done on one side, if you flip it over, you'll have that same pattern going. That's another reason why people like ribs. You can flip things over. You can, well, the old, you know, rolling sleeves up for kids, especially, knit sweaters too large so they can grow into. So when you flip that over, it's still a nice rib. This would look nice too. If I had done this whole sweater without the line of blue, if I had just done the green and the gray, that would still look nice. And that's another fun thing about knitting. You can get one pattern, say a children's pattern, and you can knit the same pattern over and over and over and over. But because you switch things up, because you change the colors or include other elements, you can have the same pattern. You can knit it for 10 kids and none of them will look alike. I think that's a fun thing about knitting. Here's another sweater of mine. I like this sweater. This incorporates this nice pocket with a different color in there, and I thought that was fun. This sweater, however, has this edging that's knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. But down below, it's staggered a little bit. We've got a repeat of 3 colors, and then we've got 3 stitches in there, and then another repeat and 3 stitches. This also has a little bit of a nice edge to it. You can incorporate lots of things. And lastly, let me show you the sweater that I'm wearing. This again was one that I knit a long time ago. I did not design it. This was designed by the great Alice Starmore, who's one of our queens of knitting. She's just an excellent designer and has done wonders for the knitting community. But isn't this a great sweater? This is called corrugated rib. And what you see is, here's a hair, sorry, I've got a lot of hairs all the time. You've got your knit stitches and you've got your purl stitches. But instead of having them all the same color, what you do is you have a round of the red, and then, you know, the different colors. What the intent is to take all the colors in the sweater and put them in the rib, so the rib echoes the sweater. Isn't that fun? Corrugated ribs are not easy to actually do. They're fussy. They're very fussy. You've got a lot of ends to knit in, weave in. So you're alternating your knits and your purls, and you're alternating the colors. And instead of just doing that around and around, you're alternating your actual balls of yarn. So at the end of it, you do have a lot of ends to weave in. But I hope this gave you a good look into ribs, and I hope that you'll enjoy knitting these 3 blocks for our afghan. So thank you for joining me on this look into ribbings. Ribbings, again, you knit the knits and you purl the purls as they face you. But what if you take the knits and work a purl over the knit and work a knit over the purl? That gives us seed stitch. That's what we're going to explore next time. Thanks for joining me, and have fun with your knitting.